everyone, and welcome. My name is Shannen Balogh, and I'm a reporter here at Insider. We're here today to talk about payments, a rapidly changing and increasingly important part of the financial world. From contactless payments to mobile wallets to QR codes, the way consumers pay and get paid has become increasingly digital as our lives have shifted online. Businesses, too, are embracing digital ways to move money as the lines between in-store and online have blurred. To discuss what's changed and what comes next in the world of digital payments, I'm thrilled to welcome our two panelists. First, we have Leah Chow, Head of Wholesale Payment Solutions at JPMorgan Chase. We also have Matt Sueoka, VP and Head of Global Strategy, Partnerships, and Enablement at Amex Digital Labs. So I'd like to start on the consumer side of things. Matt, can you talk to us about how consumers' expectations for digital payments have changed and where you're seeing merchants adjust to meet those expectations?
Probably pretty obvious for most people that the pandemic has only fueled the use of digital payments across a lot of different customer segments. Before, we were seeing certain behaviors using mobile wallets and phones to pay for things or peer-to-peer payments that were somewhat more isolated to certain user groups. Now they've become just more and more predominant as people don't like to touch terminals and they don't want to touch cash. So I really feel like the pandemic has fueled a lot of some of those underlying behaviors that we had seen in the past. You know, in particular, even the other day, my 91-year-old grandmother sent me a peer-to-peer payment instead of giving me cash, which was, in my mind, just a representation of how far things are moving.
You mentioned your grandma, and I've heard that quite a bit, right? People of all age groups embracing digital payments. And, how sticky do you think these new habits are going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, a lot of the form factors we're seeing have been around for many years. NFC contactless payments continue to be really important. In the past, we saw very regional differences. So in Europe, NFC was very popular at first. It wasn't as popular in the US several years ago. That's really changed in the last few years as more and more consumers are paying with phones and contactless cards. In Asia, in mainland China, QR codes are the most popular form factor that have been used. We've started seeing more QR codes pop up in other parts of the world. We, in fact, have a version of an Amex Pay mobile wallet that's live in Singapore that uses QR codes so customers can pay at hawker stands and other merchant locations. And in the US, I don't know about you, but I've seen, living in San Francisco, restaurants using QR codes to show you a food menu. Sometimes payments are included with that. So a lot of those older technologies are actually kind of seeing new life and new innovation. One observation that I've had, though, is these form factors don't always scale on their own. And often just adding a new form factor, even if it's digital, if it doesn't solve a broader need for the ecosystem or for the various constituents, it can be really difficult to scale. So, like I mentioned, QR codes have been in the US for a while. We've not seen them hit, the same level of scale and adoption. It really just is another example that we will probably continue to see some of those geographic variances, and that you really need to make sure the new form factor innovation really does something meaningful for the broader ecosystem in order for it to be adopted.
So in thinking about the US, obviously we recognize QR codes are kind of starting to happen, but there's like a lot of interest in mobile wallets, contactless cards, et cetera. Which do you think will sort of stay on longer or have more adoption going into later this year?
I think in the US in particular, we've seen a lot of fragmentation and usage of form factors, and I expect that to continue. So in some instances, you might want to use a physical card. In other, digital experiences, you might have a credit card saved on file, and you don't actually really need a form factor. You just go about the user experience, and when you're ready to transact, the payment's sitting there ready to go. So I expect that the fragmentation will likely continue. I do think that many of the behaviors that were adopted during the pandemic are likely to, continue on with a lot of those customer segments. Part of it is the behaviors can just tend to stick over time once you've done them a few times. And in other instances, a consumer might have realized, wow, it actually is convenient or it is beneficial for me to send this peer-to-peer payment instead of carrying cash in my wallet. I think on the whole, we're likely to see continued adoption as the norm.
Leah, I'd like to shift gears and talk a little more about the business side of things. We've seen a ton of accelerated change on the consumer payments experience, but where are we with businesses, and what are the major themes you're looking at from your perspective leading corporate payments?
On the wholesale side, I see the similar trends that Matt talked about, right? The consumerization of wholesale industries and the convergence of those industries. Right? I think, take direct to consumer, for example, right? Especially via e-commerce. That was a major pivot that many companies made last year out of a necessity. And then you look at now, many companies are looking to make those pivots permanent, right, in 2021 and beyond. And they're really looking at that model to drive their business growth, to acquire new customers, to offer new experiences. And also direct to consumer can take on many different forms, right? It could be subscription model, right? That reoccurring revenue model. It could be a marketplace model, right? Where an ecosystem will bring together the consumers and sellers together. So I think all these, we've seen corporate clients adopting and growing these new business models quite rapidly. Take subscription model, for example, right? That's not a new model. We know that Netflix has really grown on the back of that. But I think what's really surprising is the pace of adoption. Right? You think about Disney Plus, it got to 100 million subscribers in 16 months, right? And it took Netflix 10 years to get there. So I think that's just really obvious that there's an acceleration of digital payments, of new forms of direct-to-consumer type of payments. And the implications on the corporate side is just, I think, is very substantial, right? A lot of the B2B companies, they never had to really think about how to accept consumer payments, right? What kind of forms of payments that Matt talked about, all the wallets and whatnot, they didn't used to have to think about that. Now they do. And now payments becomes such an important client experience lever that can really power their growth. So I think it's quite an exciting time to see the transformation across multiple industries.
There's also examples where technology that may have been adopted at scale on the consumer side, that on the corporate side, we're seeing new use cases and new innovations coming out of that. We have a great product, for example, called American Express Go. It's essentially a version of tokenization where you tokenize a card credential, but we've used it in this commercial instance where you can issue this sort of short-term virtual account. You can give it to a user such as someone who's recruiting for a job at your company, and it makes it easier because the user can add it to their favorite mobile wallet as they're paying during their recruiting trip, and then expense and reconciliation is easier for the corporate card customer on that back end side of things. So there's a lot of great examples like that where these new use cases that didn't exist before are coming to fruition.
Absolutely. I'm curious how, from an organizational perspective, the thought processes and prioritization of payments has changed.
That's a great question, because that's the biggest change I see right across a wide range of corporates. There's always those perennial needs of really making payments more efficient, reducing the cost of payments, optimizing right how corporate treasury manage cash, right, working capital, how do we minimize the trapped cash. I think those continue to exist. But as more and more corporates look for payments to really drive growth, we see payments playing a very versatile role, right, in terms of as a revenue driver, right? The new business models look for payments to drive their growth. We talked about subscription models. You think about connected cars, right? All the payments are embedded in that connected device. And I see other companies also using payments in a financing solution as a tool to advance their diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, right? They can tier the different financing rates and payment speed to their suppliers who are minority owned or women owned. So I think it's just payments become a very, very powerful tool in terms of customer experience, in terms of advancing the corporate growth agenda, and also their other mission, right? Either diversity, inclusion, or their ESG type of goals.
That's a really interesting point. Matt, I'm curious, I guess same question to you. Amex obviously is a payments company, but also you work with other people. What have you seen in terms of companies' perspectives around payments, even, in the tech world?
I think payments become an enabler for a broader set of experiences. So I think what's changing now, and embedded payments was referenced earlier, is just this notion that you can create this proliferation of experiences, and payments really doesn't have to be such an isolated moment. It can really be built into whatever channel or form factor or experience the customer is in. And I think companies and merchants are thinking in a much more expansive way about that, and they're providing greater flexibility, whether it's ordering things ahead and then going to pick it up, or engaging with a digital assistant or a connected smart device. I recently moved into a new home during the pandemic. I was kind of surprised to see how many of the appliances and things were all smart appliances connected to the internet and the cloud. It really just brings up this proliferation of opportunity, to be honest, where you can try to find ways to add convenience for customers based on these digital channels and products where they're already spending their time today.
I mean, that's why payments is a very powerful kind of almost like revenue driver, right? Because I think I read somewhere, right, the whole internet economy is now moving away from advertisement to really like payments and financial services, right? Because those experiences are so core to the consumers and to the corporates, and we can, there are a lot of growth opportunities around those experiences.
It's always something I like to ask people in the payments world, because I remember like back in 2019 having conversations about connected devices and refrigerators that can pay for groceries. And to be honest, it sounded totally far-fetched to me, and maybe 5 years down the line. But, from both of your perspectives, like how close are we to adoption of those kinds of like absolutely behind the scenes money movement?
I think it's happening already. I feel like there's a saying that future is already here. It's just in different places, right? And then people feel it at different levels. You take the car, for example. I bet that, in the telematics, you already see a lot of the embedded payment functions, right? Either you pay for the entertainment or the smart maps or whatnot. Like all those services and payments are already invisible and embedded. Like Uber, right? I used Uber yesterday. You don't think about payments at all. You just like book a car and you step out of the car and you're done. But the payments happen in the background. So I think more and more that's where the future is really moving towards that seamless, invisible, kind of contextual payments, right? And embedded in the social media context. And for example, I don't know if you watch the Amazon show, it's called Making the Cut, like the reality fashion design show, right? Every episode at the end there's a winning outfit. And then there's a little button there that says shop the look. And you can buy that outfit right there, right, in that context, in that reality show. And then it leads you to an Amazon store dedicated to the show. I mean, that is really how embedded the payments are already today. So, quite exciting time.
I totally agree. I think we're already there. These trends and use cases are already happening. They're maybe not adopted by all segments in all places. So again, they're sort of like an early adopter group, and some of these use cases might take a little bit of time to scale. I guess maybe to be a little bit controversial, I'll slightly disagree with Leah in the fact that I think that invisible payments can be magical and can be great for certain use cases. So I agree that can be a great experience, and we're probably going to see more and more of those examples. There are, however, other times where you don't want the payment to be invisible. Sometimes you want to check, certain details before you say, yes, take my money, and the transaction is complete. So I do think it is use case dependent and kind of channel and circumstance dependent, but it's all about creating a great experience. And depending on what great is defined as, that's how we'll have to kind of version how invisible or front and center the interactions could be. And maybe just to connect back to my earlier commentary on form factor and QR codes, again, the innovation needs to solve a need and actually be a better experience or be a better use case or opportunity. If it's just a form factor switch, or if it's great for a consumer but not great for a merchant, it's going to be difficult to scale. So I do think there will sort of start to be a balance. So when I think about the connected appliances in my house or a connected car, sometimes a card on file saved might be good enough to enable certain types of use cases. Other times, I really might want that newer form factor that's more unique.
No, I agree with you, Matt. Absolutely. I think especially in the corporate world, they want to see all the details of a payment. They want that visibility, real-time visibility and information on like what are all the payments being made, right? How much they get charged, what's the fee, what's the FX spread that built into those payments. I think in those cases, then the solution is really that real-time, right, on-demand, multi-bank solution, like API-driven solution that gives the corporate right treasurer and payments has that level of visibility, the holistic view of their payments, their status, right? They can have the control and really think about their cash.
Yeah, those are great points. And I guess my question would be, going forward, how does this all shake out? Are we going to see more bespoke, customizable solutions? Are consumers going to be able to choose what they do and don't see?
And on the wholesale side, right, and what we see is really there's no one size fits all, right? They are corporates, right? Maybe in the more not so digital native players. So think of traditional like consumer retail clients, right, or automakers and whatnot. As they venture into the more direct consumer type of model, they would want more support, right? Meaning like they would want a bank or a payments fintech partner, right? Really help them think about the end-to-end flows and how Some of them may even want to outsource, right, the entire process to a provider. And to the other extreme of the digital natives, right, think of the marketplaces and really the native digital players, they want to provide more modular services. I don't imagine like the largest e-commerce platform would outsource, right, their payment processing, the value-added services, but they will look at really what are the modules they want, right? They may want an API-driven solution to plug into their ecosystem. They may want to leverage the banks for their core competencies, right? So I think there's a wide range. And as a bank, JP Morgan, we just want to be able to offer those modular value-added services really depending on the client needs.
I agree. I think it's hard to kind of generalize. I think you have to be prepared to support a wide range of use cases. You need to give tools and products and services that merchants and tech companies and other partners can embed, where they see fit in the right ways. And we spend a lot of time working together to make sure the security is there and the, great customer experience is there from an end-to-end standpoint. So, in some instances, giving customers more choice and more customization, less simple. And sometimes simplicity is better. So I do really think it depends on the circumstance and the use case. So we have to build products and services that can support that broad range in the ecosystem.
Just looking forward, given all the change that we've seen over the last 18 months or so, what are, the more nascent, more in the works kinds of payments things that you're seeing? What do you expect to shine through the end of this year?
I would say for us at JP Morgan, there are two things we're working on at JP Morgan, right, in terms of more thinking about the future. One is we briefly touch upon the Internet of Things, right, the embedded payments. And then we really think about how we, can offer those, we call it microservices, right, of payment services to our clients in a very tailored way, which, by the way, is a huge mindset shift, right? In the past, banks, we like to own everything. We like to build everything. Like we like clients to use our banking portals for everything. That's just not the path forward anymore, right? We're building microservices. We're embedding our payment services, banking services, right, into those smart devices. We want to, be part of that ecosystem. So I think that's definitely something that we're exploring and investing very aggressive on. The other one, I would say more nascent payment mechanism is really the next generation payments platform and rails, right? By that, I mean the blockchain-driven payments platform and JP Morgan Coin as a form of tokenization to really revolutionize the cross-border, right, multi-currency real-time money movement and information movement. Certainly that's in early days, but I see tremendous potential, right? You think about our Link platform, which is our blockchain platform. We already have 400 plus, right, banks and institutions signed up for it. We are live with use cases, right? We connected 25 of the largest 50 banks on the blockchain. So really, there are real use cases of account validation, for example, right, on that blockchain to be able to validate consumer and corporate accounts real time globally. So certainly I see that as kind of the next frontier of the art of the possible, right, for payments really moving into that global real time distributed manner.
Yeah, to build upon that, I completely agree that in the kind of somewhat bundled blockchain plus crypto plus digital currency plus central bank digital currencies, there's a ton of opportunity there. We're still in the early innings, I believe, and I think as an industry in financial services, there's a lot we're going to have to navigate from a regulatory perspective, but also just covering the basics of what would users expect and want. But I think there's a lot of potential there, so that's something we're certainly actively looking at. I also feel like there's kind of much room to improve some of the basic things that we still have in place today. So I mentioned earlier, peer-to-peer payments continues to explode in growth. We recently launched an Amex send and split feature that makes it easier for customers to split transactions and get paid back directly to their American Express cards through a partnership with PayPal and Venmo. So there are some great ways that I think we can still improve upon some behaviors and needs, even though we have, some starting products and platforms that are already out there.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to keeping an eye out on all of those emerging trends. Leah, Matt, thank you so much for a really interesting discussion.